I'm gonna let the music play. I'm gonna let the music play. Don't know what's going on with the music. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. This is Pamela, and you are watching Pam Entertainment TV, where we review movies, television series. We review celebrity legal news, celebrity news, and we have pop culture chats. And this is one of my pop culture chats. Now, this is a little different from the stuff that I'm going to do. There's two things that are going to happen. I won't be visually seen. So if you all are here now, you can see me. You know it's me. You know my voice. I am going to cut my camera off because, again, we're going through a heat wave where I live at. And baby, it is hot. And it keeps the room cool if I have the fans on. And if I have to have the lights on and all of these lights that I have, it brings the temperature back up. And then I'll have all of this whirling noise that you have. I'm still going to have it, but I don't have to have it as intense as it is if I have to have these lights on to show who I am. All right, here we go. Love y'all too. So, listen, this is what I want to talk about. Now, ever since the Essence Fest, there's been this huge discourse about what is FBA, what is ADOS, what is Black Indian. Do you all, everybody who is melanated, have skin coming from Mother Africa? We've had this discourse for a long time. And, at this point, I would tell you I'm sick of it. And the reason why I'm sick of it is because no one is wanting to sit down and have answers. They're wanting to continue to poke fingers at each other. And if you follow me and you follow my channel, I'm going to point out the discrepancies. But I'm also going to be like, if no one is talking about what we can do to have some type of recourse, then I don't want to continue to have this conversation. But I will tell you again, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Shout out to the greedy Africans that exposed what they were doing in regards to the Essence Fest, in regards to wanting to siphon some money and all that. Shout out to y'all. And I say this, with as best I can, because this allowed for me to go back and to look up and to go back and to challenge beliefs that I had. Shout out to those people that are FBA. Shout out to those people that are ADOS. Shout out to the people who have identified in their culture being Black Indians or Indigenous. Shout out to the people that understand and know that their relatives are from Mother Africa. Shout out to all y'all. Because with this discourse, it led me to do a couple of things. Now, so let me just go back and be very clear about what I am talking about. So, I am Black American. My folks can be traced back from the South. My people are, when I did my ancestry.com without handing over my DNA, I was able to trace people back. One thing about my family, particularly on my mother's side, they were very good about keeping records. And keeping records also include Bible notations, also include, I had a lot of folks that were writers and things of that nature. So they would write different things in regards to who we were. And so we have all these writings, I have all these names. And so when I started my ancestry.com journey, and this is probably, now I'm going to say it's about 20 years ago. Because what happened is that I was the person that was in charge of our family reunion that year. And so I decided that I was going to start tracing all of the information and things like that. And as I was tracing all of the information, I got as far as, like I said, I got as far as the people who were writing information, and I got names. So it started back in 2005. I didn't read when Ancestry.com and all of that stuff was coming out. It probably was maybe 2 or 3 years after that that I decided that, hey, let me go on here and look and see what's going on, because other people had looked. And I thought that you had to give your DNA. No, you just had to pay a fee and then trace the names back, and they would give you little family tree like graphs and things like that. And they would say, hey, I've traced this back, and you might be related to this person, or you might be related to that person because this person is looking. And I was fortunate enough that there were a lot of people who were looking up their ancestry, because a lot of people didn't do that, because every Black American knows that the transatlantic slave trade happened when it happened, and every Black American knows that you may have you can trace your roots to the transatlantic slave. I don't disagree with that. However, there are some Black Americans, and it happened in my family, that would talk about these particular people were Indian. These are people. Now, let me be very clear. I am using the terminology that was used within my family when I started this. Now, remember, we're talking about between 2012 and 2017. Okay? So I'm going to use the terminology that was used. So if people are offended, I do apologize, but I have to tell my story, and I have to tell my story the way that I can tell it. And so the terminology is what it is. So, because FBA and ADOS and all that those weren't terms that I knew of back between as I started my journey between 2005 and 2017. Okay. So as I was going back, and let me be very clear, because I know a lot of people will say, well, Pam, you're talking about so far in the past. Again, let me explain who I am talking about. I am talking about my mother. And I am talking about my mother and her mother's people and her father's people. Okay? Because there were certain things that I wanted to know. My grandfather, my mother's father, I did not have the opportunity to meet him. I did have opportunities to meet his brothers and sisters. All right? When I tell you, and I was going to provide some pictures, but then I said, no, I'm not going to put these pictures up, because one thing I know that people love to pick apart a lot of different things, and what you will not do, and I won't allow for you all to do, to pick my family apart. So what I did see from the picture that I saw of my grandfather, and having the opportunity to meet his sister, to meet his brothers, to meet his cousins, one thing that I noticed that I did see is that, as far as African features, the African feature that was prevalent in those people was their melanated skin and the variations of the melanated skin. Some people, I would say a couple of his brothers, look like what we conventionally understand to be Native American. And I looked at his sisters, who look like what we would conventionally say are Black American women. They didn't have the kinky hair, but they were melanated people nonetheless. And that was all through that particular part of my family coming out of Brooks County, Georgia. And so as I was going back through my family tree, when I heard people talk about that, now I will tell you, and this is a lot of, and this is how people to go back and to look. The first thing I thought about was, oh, everybody wants to be attached to be Native American, because no one wants to confront the fact that the slave masters went into those slave quarters and assaulted the black women. Now, that is true history in my family. I kid you not, there's true history in my family. However, there were certain things when I went back, there was a particular situation that happened. There was a male relative on my mother's father's side that started off in South Carolina and that he ended up in Brooks County, Georgia. Now, this all happened during Reconstruction. And so, as I looked at that, and I couldn't trace anything else when you start talking about tracing Black Americans past where he was and how he got to be there, I didn't get past other than the fact that yes, he was on a plantation in South Carolina. What stumped me was I couldn't understand how did he get from South Carolina, the place that he started in South Carolina, to Brooks County, Georgia. Now, let me explain this to you. Now, he started out on the coast, and then he went from off the coast of South Carolina and made his way down to Brooks County. Now, again, I will tell you, in my ignorance, I sat there and was like, child, he was on the train and he saw them big booty girls in Brooks County. And baby, he saw them big booty girls and he just jumped off the train and said, like, this is where I need to be. Now, I say that all tongue in cheek and ha ha he he, but again, that's what I thought. I thought that there was something or someone that not, and I didn't have the wherewithal to think that maybe there was a relationship that they were there from. And so I just thought, oh, he was just there because he saw these beautiful women and he decided that he was going to take string. Now, mind you, we're talking about the South. We're talking about the deep South. Brooks County, Quitman, all of those places. That's the Lowndes County. That's the deep South in Georgia. And shout out to my folks that live there. Cook County, Berrien County, that's the deep South. And I couldn't figure that out. And again, that's where it stumped me. So I wouldn't say that I was content, but I understood that I hit a block. I hit a wall because, there was no other information that I could get. And again, I was able to trace my mother's family on her mother's side. Same way, I reached a block and then just kind of left it there. Because I found out that, like my mother's side of the family, there was a lot of people that were from the Alabama area. And they had the last name of Flanori. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but they had a lot of people from that area. And so, like I said, I was able to trace it as far as I could trace it. And I was content. I went back at that point in 2016, 2017. For me, I went back about at that point, about 9 generations. So I'm cool. I understand. But y'all get to this discourse that y'all had this month with the Essence Fest and all of this other stuff, and me being introduced to foundational Black Americans and what they believe and who they believe they are, being introduced to ADOS and who they are and who they were, and being introduced that their people were talking about Black Indians, and being and understanding and knowing that yes, Black folks came here to the United States of America through the transatlantic slave trade, right? So again, I want to be able to pull, let's see. what I want to do is that there was, let me look over here, because there was a map that I had pulled out in a previous video that I want to pull up. And y'all, this live is off the cuff. So I'm just letting you know that it is off the cuff. Hold on. All right. Hold on. So here we have. So we understand the Atlantic slave trade. You had a lot of people. If you can't see, you had a lot of people coming from, and it's coming down here. And maybe I should take it out of. But anyway, it talks about the trade. You know, they go to. Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to take it out of here. Let me stop sharing. Let me show here. This is the. It's the wrong map. Give me one moment. Here we go. I got the right map, y'all. I'm excited. Let's get back. So here's the map. This is the map that shows you from the areas you see over here in the purple. You see over here, these are the areas off the coast of these areas where the people were pulled, and that's being kind. They were pulled from these areas off the map and they were sent to these different places. And you see the numbers, right? You see that 92,000 went to Argentina and Uruguay. You see 3.16 million went to Brazil. You see 356,000 went to the Ghanaians. You see that 2.7 went to the Caribbean, so other Caribbean islands. You see that 906 and 935,000 went to Jamaica. You see that 765,000 went to Cuba. Let's go back over here to Europe. You see that they imported 7,600 to Europe, and they imported off the coast over here in this little area right here. If you're not familiar, this would be like Virginia, North and South Carolina, and it looks like part of Georgia. They imported they imported 700, 300,000 to those areas, right? And I want to keep us in context because in this whole discourse that we're having in regards to uh, FB and if you're from Mother Africa and all those things, the numbers. I need us to pay attention to the numbers. 3.169 million were sent to Brazil. 92,000 were sent to Argentina or Uruguay. Other Caribbean countries, they had 2.7 million sent there. Jamaica received 935,000. Cuba received 765,000, with the United States receiving 307,000. So why are you bringing that up, Pam? You just keep talking and you just don't. What are you bringing that up? Because I need for us to be very clear about those numbers. All those different places had the atrocity. So we're not going to play the oppression Olympics with anybody. But the numbers is what's important. You had 307,000 enslaved people sent to the United States of America. At the end of slavery in the United States, and this number is based on the 1860 census, at the end of slavery, because remember, there was 307,000 folks that were sent here. Because everybody, our continental Africans, back all of this up. They say all of this stuff is true. And if you're talking about slavery that lasted over 400 years, which 307,000, and you factor in you have brought people over from another country, they're not used to the diseases and things that were going on. So you look for a certain amount of that particular that the enslaved population to have gone on with the ancestors because of that. You look at the fact that there was a whole lot of atrocities that, it's a whole lot of going on. And again, I'm not playing oppression Olympics. All I'm asking to you is this. It started off with 307,000. That were sent, and I'm going to add the fact that they were sent to before the United States became the United States, they were a colony of the UK of Britain. But at the end of slavery, at the end of so we're talking about all the things that happened during that time. You had the American Revolution. You had the American Revolution against the Britain. You had the Civil War against the South. At that time, when it ended, and as far as at the 1860 census, there were approximately 4 million enslaved people. Four million people from 307 million, 300,000. It ended up that there were 4 million people. Now, I'm not dumb and I'm not obtuse. I understand that there were breeding farms. I understand there were all these little different things because enslaved people were considered to be a commodity. I understand that clearly. But help me do the math, because maybe my math ain't mathing. And even if I take that you had 300,000 and you had, let's say, half of those are women and girl children, and you breeded them, even at that rate, they're only going to be able to have one child per year with the odd in and out of twins or triplets. You're still not going to get to me that 4 million people. So where did all those other people come from? Now, you ask my brethren over in Africa, they say they come from Mother Africa. You all are African. You are Mother Africa. So all of you all that are here, because you all came from Mother Africa. And again, I've told you in several other lives. Okay. And I was talking about the the monies and things like that. And I was like, how insidious of it that at the beginning of this transatlantic slave trade, you were selling your fellow Africans because you all are tribal. Good, bad, or indifferent, that's what it is. You all are tribal. So when you conquered or defeated one tribe, you saw the hands of the white people looking at you, the Europeans looking at you. What are you going to do with this tribe that you conquer? Because I'm quite sure that you possibly enslaved them or you possibly had pruned them from the timeline. But you figured the Europeans were wanting to trade. And so you traded the people for the textiles, the umbrellas, and the guns without the bullets, and other different things. You know, they gave you all of these other different things. There are probably quite a lot of different things. And so if you are a chieftain or whoever you were at that time, they traded other different things. But I think the okie doke is what got y'all. Because they looked at y'all and said, oh, they're willing to trade their people. And I'm looking at them because they're not looking at you. I'm looking past them and I'm seeing gold. I'm seeing diamonds. I'm seeing spices and ink. I'm seeing animals I've never seen before. Continue to trade your people, and we're going to accept that. But we're also going to go back to Europe, tell everybody what this continent is, divide it up, and then come back and colonialize you. Because see, now, since you've already produced the labor for us in our other areas that we have colonized, we're going to come back and colonize your country. We're going to colonize the continent because we need those resources that you all have that you all don't seem to treasure. I had an African lady from, I think if I remember, I think she was from Cameroon. And she made a statement to me that I just never forget because we were having a conversation in a laundromat, mind you. And she was like, gold, you all like gold and you all like those things. Those things grow at my feet. I don't care about those types of things. And she said that and she was very serious about that. And I will tell you that made me think about my perception about, having diamond rings, having all those different things and looking up which gem is more valuable than anything, because diamonds are not as valuable because they are plentiful. It's the other gemstones, the rubies, the sapphires, the emeralds. All of those things are more valuable. So you ladies are running around here trying to get these big carat diamond rings. Go on and get you, find your birthstone. Find a sapphire or a ruby and make that your engagement ring. Excuse me. But anyway, all of this to say, and again, I'm talking about who am I? So 307,000 folks came here from the transatlantic slave. And again, if we talk about the breeding farms and all those different things that happened to people in that Virginia, North, South, and Georgia area, and some places in Florida. And again, factoring in, they started when girls were just started to menstruate. You still wouldn't get those types of numbers. And that's my whole point. So if you still wouldn't get 4 million by 1865, and I'm going to say I know that slavery ended officially in 1863, but my brethren in Texas didn't know that they was free until 1865. So I'm going to say 1865. That still doesn't account for the 4 million. Now, if you're that person that can go back and do all of this numbers and stuff like that, first of all, I'm gonna side eye you, but I'll appreciate you because you can fact check me. Okay. So where did all these other people come from? Because the discourse has been that Black Americans don't know where they come from because they will not identify with only Mother Africa. And so there's this whole discourse, and not only is it with Africans from the continent, it is also a discourse how people, other people, whether you are Latin, in some instances, and I will be fair to my Caribbean brothers and sisters, because the most of you all that I have talked to, y'all don't have this big discourse like that. There are some of y'all that are showing out and cutting up, but the ones that I have met hadn't had this whole discourse because, again, that battle slash slave ship hit all those places over here too, going all the way down to Uruguay, coming all the way up to the United States of America. Now, these countries weren't called that in the first place, but that's where they were. So in the Americas, and I'm saying the Americas of North, South, and Central America, if we count up all of these numbers that we see on the screen, just really brisk, 5, you're talking about 6 to almost 7 million folk spread out from North America down to South America, right? So again, who am I? So as I told you earlier before, I did my ancestry.com. Now, I did not give my DNA. And side note, those of you all that participated in that, what is that, 23andMe, and you gave up your DNA to those people, if you have not looked at my video that I did probably a month and a half ago, that company has gone bankrupt and they are selling your genetic material because, again, once you gave it to them, you signed that little waiver saying that you no longer own your genetic material, and your genetic material is being sold to the highest bidder. Now, they are saying, oh, it's for research and it's for that. No, baby, there are law enforcement agencies that are contracted with the federal government that is trying to purchase your genetic material. And what I mean by genetic material, once you gave that genetic material, they took your genetic material, they synthesized it, and then they came up with your DNA profile. Now, do they still have the 17 times you had to spit in that cup? I don't know if they have that particular stuff. But once they took that material, they synthesized it into your DNA profile, and they have that. So they are selling that information to the highest bidder. And that has been okayed by a judge here in the United States of America to help 23andMe to pay off whatever debts that they have. Now, I don't know if they are completely insolvent at this point, but that's just a side note to let you all know. Y'all going to learn to stop being so free with your genetic material. Okay, let's continue. So how did that impact me? So remember I told you at the beginning, I started looking back in my ancestry, going through the lists and everything like that Ancestry.com had, and then the side quests that Ancestry.com would send me on. And I ended up back in about 60 in South Carolina. And that's where I told you, as far as I was able to trace back, my oldest ancestor was back in 1860. And that I saw that he was on that register. I saw that his parents were on that register. So that went back further. But it's anything further than that, because, at the other time that I started to come back to, everything required you to pay for it. Information that was free back in the early 2010s, everybody started putting everything behind the paywall. So I never did go back behind that paywall and to find out any other information. And honestly, I was fine because of the fact that I knew that I can trace my family here, and the information that I had in my head at that point was that my folks came from Africa, they were enslaved, and they were in South Carolina. But what stumped me is that particular ancestor that I would think would want to stay around, because everyone, not everyone, but most Black Americans, when they trace their ancestors, they usually would stay within the county or the city where they had the plantation was at. Because again, the migration, the great migration of Black folks up north didn't happen at that time. Everybody was staying where they were at, and they were building their communities and things like that during Reconstruction where they were at. So for me, it was odd as to why that particular relative went from South Carolina down to Brooks County, Georgia. Couldn't figure it out. And I was like, well, it don't matter in my head, because I know who my people are. I can trace these people right here. If I come up with any other people, because if I come up with any other people, I'll be able to see that. I have an aunt that used to live in the South Carolina area, and she would talk about her coming up and meeting people that looked like her relatives down in Georgia, had similar same last names. But we know that a bulk of our family members came from South Carolina, and then they migrated down to Georgia. And so I was cool with that. I was like, hey, my folks, I would say my folks originally started off in South Carolina, and they went down to Georgia, and then they exploded, and all of these little different things. So let's go back to my folks in Brooks County. Now, in Brooks County, when I'm talking about my mother's father's people, and also when I'm talking about my mother's people, there was things that they all had in common. In that county, they can tell you who they were related to. And they could tell you, this person, they Indian. Them people are Indian. And they come, they would say all of these things. Now, mind you, all of this thing was coming out. Now, back in the late 80s, early 90s, I was a 20-plus-year-old young woman. And you were talking about old folks in history, and I didn't really want to pay attention. However, this is how you have Pam Entertainment TV right now. The nosiness in me wanted to hear what they had to say. And if you grew up in a Black American household, you just couldn't sit up under the elders as they were talking whatever stuff that they were talking. You had to be busy. So as me, you had to be in the kitchen. Now, cutting up the vegetables, sweeping the floor, doing the dishes, and all of that stuff. You talking about your girl. Because, see, I was able to then stay in the room as the men folk and the women folk were able to talk. Because, see, I was helpful. And that's a side note for you young folks. Go and be helpful to your grandmama them. Go and be helpful to all of those people in there. And ask questions, because they definitely will tell you the information. They are itching to tell you this information. But you got to figure out how you do it. And like I said, that was how I did it. I would go and visit and sit and do the dishes, do all this kind of stuff, talk and everything like that. And I would glean some information. And one of the information I would glean visually is that I saw a lot of my relatives didn't look like traditional Black Americans. And what I mean by that is the African features. Because even when I look at me and I look at my, you can look at my profile picture. There's some people in my family, most of the people in my family didn't have the big lips. A lot of people in my family didn't have the wide noses, they would have the hook noses. I'm right there in the middle. And I'm just explaining those things that, that you talk about with African features. So we won't be talking down on any African features. We won't be talking down on anything. I'm just telling you visually what I notice. I also notice hair. Hair texture in the Black American community is big. And I understood if I looked at my mother and my grandmother, they had straight but curly hair. So like my mother had hair like 3, so it wasn't tightly coiled. It was more so just loosely curled type of hair. I had other people that had the very tightly coiled hair. My grandmother, she got that from my grandmother, her mother. Her hair wasn't tightly coiled like that, like we would say is 4C hair, 4A, 4B, 4C hair. She didn't have that. My mother has this very loose, almost straight textured hair. That's one thing. You look at my mother and her father's people, her aunts, they had that straight or curly type hair. Her uncles, they were fairer skinned, but they weren't all passing. And remember, to pass is an action. And they would be clocked. Now, if they stayed out of the sun and stayed indoors and never went outside, that would be one thing. But they would be clocked because of the fact that they weren't that fair skinned. But as far as their hair and how they looked, everyone would say, oh, they have Indian in them. And again, I am using the terminology that was used when I started this. So I understand the new terminology is Native American, but I am talking to people my age, and I'm talking there. I am not here to try to talk down on people or anything like that. I'm explaining to you as I come up, okay? Because the terminology of Native American and stuff like that didn't come around until the late 2010s. So I would say like 2018 or something like that. We didn't really just start vocalizing that as a whole, as a country. There was different things about calling them Redskins. This is the reason why the Washington Redskins are now the Washington Commanders, because we all understand that that's a derogatory word to talk about the Native Americans, okay? And I started looking at my people like this. Now, again, I will tell you that I'll say I was dumb. I was ignorant and I thought I knew what I was talking about. That for me is the definition of being dumb. I would just say, oh, they just don't want to acknowledge that massa was in the slave quarters. They don't want to acknowledge that. But there are just little things that happen culturally that are different. Won't really go into it, but I just noticed when I went there were things culturally that were different outside of the mainstream of what we understand to be Black Americans. Culturally, they were different. They had the ability to fuse holistic remedies and medicines with Christian practices. My aunt, I don't care what was wrong with you, she was able to go into her yard and find out what could heal you. She understood that. The men folk would leave outside of the women folk and they would go out to places outside of people, the out just out, I was going to say in the fields, or say they would go out there, build fires, talk and sing. Now, mind you, I'm just thinking, oh, all of this is just how we do. But I noticed that when you get amongst your people and stuff like that, because again, when I got back, when I sit down and I talk to people, when we talk about family reunions are odd. I hear a lot of people talk about, oh, well, we don't do family reunions because the old folks just want us to get together and stuff like that. But see, family reunions in my family is where oral traditions were passed down, and there are things that are written. You can go back to the very first family reunion that we had, and then come up this way, and you'll have photos, you'll have blurbs, and all these little different things of the people who were in our family and what they did. And then you had that oral tradition of talking about all of these different people. Now, I will tell you, when you go back from like the 80s, when my family, well, they didn't call it family reunion in the 80s. It was always everybody came home for the summer. All the people that left during the Great Migration would come back down, and they'd have that family picnic. And then it morphed into a family reunion. But they always talked about the family. They always talked about who was where here. Keep up with so and so and so and so. Having someone's telephone number was a lifeline. If you didn't have that telephone number, you had to know somebody else within the community that they lived in. Because again, everybody didn't have a telephone, particularly back in the 40s and 50s. They had party lines and all kinds of stuff. So all of my people, they did the Great Migration, and they went up to New York. They went to New Jersey, and they went out west to California. A telephone number was a lifeline. But anyway, and so I've told you all about the visual things of how I looked and saw my people. And so all of that to say is, I just chalked it up like, hey, they don't even want to even acknowledge that Massa was in the slave quarters. They don't want to do that. So you all out here having this whole discourse about who Black Americans are. Are they FBA? Are they ADOS? Are they Black Indians? Are they from Mother Africa? I will tell you this. Respect what a Black American tells you who they are. Respect it. Respect it. Remember, I told you about my ancestor. I couldn't understand why he went from South Carolina to Brooks County. And I didn't understand about them talking about that they were Native Americans, Indians. Here's what I found out. There were Indian tribes that if they wanted the title of being civilized, they were registered with the federal government. But there are some Indian, and they got all the perks and whatever that was, whatever came with that. But there were Indian tribes that did not do that for whatever reason. And they are recognized via the states, but they're not recognized via the federal government. Here's what I found when I went back. Because again, you all started talking, the FBAs was talking about being native to America, and this is what I found out. Of course, he left South Carolina and he went south because he's possibly was Appalachia or Lower Creek, and the Appalachia and the Lower Creek were prevalent down in Alabama, in Georgia, in the areas where my people are from. So all those stories I heard about all of this stuff make sense to me. There were no black Indians. You just talking. Everything comes from Africa. Africa does not have the what's the word I'm looking for? The majority of melanation in their skin. You don't. There are melanated people across this vast world. And no, I'm not going to argue with you about how they got to be melanated and all that other stuff. I'm not going to argue anything like that. What I do know that there are melanated people all across this globe. And stop discounting Black Americans and their history. We know what our history is. So all I'm saying to you, who am I? Now I've had another invigoration about now going back, because now I understand. And there are supposed to be state records in South Carolina that I can now delve into in regards with this particular ancestor. Because again, my dumb behind thought it had to do everything with him visualizing the beautiful women that are in Brooks County. But it was much more intimate than that. It was I'm going home. I'm leaving here, and I'm going back. I'm going down to where my people are originally from. So I am excited about it. So again, a lot of times I know that you all are out here swinging in these streets about all this stuff, and you all are now talking about boycotting in August. But let me tell you, y'all do whatever it is you want to. I have never gone to an African braiding shop in my life. I don't know about the culture in that African braiding shop. Everybody has done my hair has been a Miss Hazel, Miss Arthurine, and them. I've always had a Black American feeling in my hair because I grew up in a culture where you don't have 5 and 6 people touching your hair at the same time. So going for me personally, and I don't have nothing against African braiding shops. I don't. Because me personally, I grew up in a culture where you didn't have 4 and 5 people in your head at the same time. I just didn't grow up like that. Just saying. So if that's what you want to do because you have been slighted, that is your right. If you've never been to an African braiding shop, let them people who have had bad dealings with the African braiding shop, let them do that. All I tell you is to mind your dollars and to mind your advocacy. Understand what you are fighting for. And don't let anybody, if you are a Black American, tell you who you are. You identify with who you are and be through with it. So all I wanted to tell you all is that this whole discourse has opened up. This discourse had opened up a new vigoration for me to go back through my family tree and all those different places that I did not know to look in back in between 2005 and 2017. That has opened up that discourse for me, and I'm excited about it. So once I go back and I look up that information, then I'm going to tell you who I am. Right now, because again, stating that I am African American came in 1988. Before then, I was always Black. I came from the culture of James Brown. Say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. That's the culture that I come from. So if you want to identify as African American, that's on you, boo. I identify right now as Black American. Now, what that entails, I'm looking forward to seeing what else I find out. I've been newly invigorated. And I hope that you all are invigorated to go back and look, not letting other people define you. Because remember, you can't define them. They will tell you quick in a heartbeat, look you right in your face with them dead eyes and tell you, I am Ghanaian, I am Nigerian, I am Cameroonian, I'm Congolese, I am Jamaican, I'm St. Lucian, I'm Bahamian. They look you right in your eyes and tell you who you are. Don't let them punk you to tell you who you are. You define that for yourself. Because I know they'll tell you, oh, Mother Africa, we need to get along. I wouldn't disagree with that. But if getting along means that I have to somehow deny who I am just to fit your narrative, I don't look at that as getting along. And I'm loving this discourse because there's other things that are coming up that I am going to do. It has, like I said, the Essence Fest and all of that just kind of open things up. And there's other avenues of content that I do want to delve in. But I just wanted to come on here to tell you how excited I am. About looking past of the people of who I am. Because again, the math ain't mathing for me. And if you are a genealogist and things like that, make the math for me. Let me know how 307,000 people over 250 years turned into 4.5 million people at the end of slavery. Let me know. Even if you factor in, you still have to factor in the deaths and all that other stuff. Let me know how that happened. But I am telling you that I am excited about getting to South Carolina and finding out some more about my people. I may find me some cousins I ain't know nothing about. We may have some similarities and things like that, even though we might be 6th and 7th and 8th removed, 10th, 11th, 12th, 8th removed, 8th to 16th removed. I still want to know. So I wanted to share that with you because in all of the negativity, there's something for me that became positive, and I had to call my emotional support people, my brother and my friend Bessie. I had to call them because I was in here boo-hoodling, y'all. When I tell you I was in here boo-hoodling, I was boo-hoodling. But it wasn't being upset. It's just like, you know how you get overwhelmed, because I don't know if anybody really recognizes the fact that you can be overwhelmed with so many emotions at the same time. And I know for women, the only thing that we know how to do is just cry, because it's so many emotions that are hitting you at the same time. So I was in here boo-hoodling. Now, the maturity in me understands that I have emotional response humans that I can talk to and kind of cycle through just that particular emotion. But I thought I'd go on here because for me, that was a positive thing. So for me, I started to come on here because I'm hoping to encourage people to stop. I mean, you can pay attention to the noise, but figure out how that noise, you can fine tune it on the dial tone and figure how that works for you. Because number one, there is no man, no woman on this earth that's going to define who I am. I define who I am, whether you agree with it or not. I don't care if you get mad as who I define myself. I don't tell you who you are, and you don't get to tell us who we are as Black Americans. I think that those days are over with, because in order to keep us undefined, people have, and it doesn't matter if they're white tea people, the 8.5 by 11. It doesn't matter if it is Hispanic people. It doesn't matter if they're Asian people. And y'all, it is not mattering that it is African people. All of these people feel like they have the ability to lay claim to your autonomy as Black Americans. All of these people. We recognize it in the 8.5 by 11s. We recognize it in the Hispanic community, the European community. We recognize it with the Asian folks. And now we are recognizing it with people who are our skin folk, but they're not our kin folk. All right, people. That's all I got for y'all. I just wanted to share with you that I have gone down a whole line of communication, a whole line of stuff that I'm looking forward to see, and go back even further as who I am. And I'm excited about it, y'all. All right, people. Let me know down in the comments, because I think that this will be great as a community, and I don't care where you come from. As a community. And I mean as a community from Pam Entertainment TV, because I have a whole bunch of folks that follow me. But as a community, leave it down in the comments. How have you all been able to research your ancestors? Is there any places that we need to go in order to do that? Sharing is caring, and I'm talking about people, Americans, United States of Americans. Put that down in the comment. Give us some resources. Sharing is caring. Now, what I won't tolerate is any of this hate and all of this discourse about who's better and nothing. I'm not going to do that. If you've got some information, that tangible information that could be shared, y'all make sure y'all put it down in the comments. But if y'all trying to come at each other, I'm not having that. Again, shout out to Richard Lou Dennis and Carolyn Wonga and all of them people. I was going to say with your greedy asses, but I don't know what else to say. So, that's why I hesitated. But shout out to y'all for opening our eyes on how skin folks will take advantage of Black Americans. Asian folks will take advantage of African Americans. Hispanic folks will take advantage of African Americans. And white tea people will take advantage of African Americans. So now that our eyes are open, no longer are the scales over our eyes. We need to do what we need to do. And again, I am encouraging you all to go back through your history. And what you find is what you find, and nobody can take that away from you. Don't let anybody punk you out and say, oh, that's not the truth, because that's what happened. I was dumb. Because everyone around me, oh, those white people, everybody don't got Indian in they don't do that. They don't have Native American. Don't do that. Because there is documents going back from the 1500s, and that's the 16th century, that talks about from the conquistadors that came to this land, particularly around the Louisiana, Texas, Mississippi area, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, that saw melanated people, darker melanated skinned people. They talked about it. They wrote about it. Because one thing I know about Europeans is they keep great records. So go back through. I'm invigorated again. And when I come to a better place to be able to espouse who I am. I'm going to come back and do another video to let y'all know. Please tell a friend, tell a kin, tell a coworker, tell that heifer that you can't stand that I'm over here making these videos. And as always, people, bye-bye.